Around 2,000 years ago, a Roman diplomat was traveling through Egypt when his cart accidentally ran over a cat. It was a total accident. Didn't matter. Within minutes, an angry mob surrounded him. Egyptian officials showed up and actually begged the crowd to stop, partly because Rome was the regional superpower and killing a Roman could start a war. The crowd didn't care. They dragged him out and killed him on the spot over a cat. And here's the thing. Under Egyptian law, the mob was basically in the right. We like to imagine that laws are supposed to be reasonable, sensible rules made by sensible people. But when you actually dig into the legal codes of the ancient world, you find something genuinely unhinged. Rules so strange, so brutal, and so weirdly specific that they sound made up. They're not. And by the end of this video, you'll see one law so bizarre, it punished you for doing absolutely nothing at all. So why were ancient laws this insane? To understand it, you have to throw out almost everything you assume about how law works today. There were no courts of appeal, no human rights, no line between religion, revenge, and government. The first written law codes weren't written to be fair. They were written to do three things: keep the powerful in power, keep the gods happy, and make sure everyone was too terrified to step out of line. Punishment wasn't about rehabilitation. It was about sending a message so loud that nobody would ever forget it. And crucially, these laws were carved in stone, literally. Which means, unlike a lot of ancient history, we're not guessing. We can read the actual text. Everything I'm about to show you is real, pulled from surviving codes and ancient historians. A few of the juiciest stories were probably exaggerated over time, and I'll tell you when we hit those. But the laws themselves? Very, very real. Let's start climbing the ladder of madness. Let's begin in Babylon, around 1754 BC, with the most famous law code in history, the Code of Hammurabi. You've probably heard an eye for an eye. What you haven't heard is how insanely literal they were about it. Take the building code. If a builder built a house and that house collapsed and killed the owner, the builder was put to death. Okay, harsh, but sort of understandable. But here's where it breaks your brain. If the collapse killed the owner's son, they didn't punish the builder. They went and killed the builder's son instead, an innocent kid, executed for his father's bad carpentry. That was considered justice. Fair was fair, apparently, as long as somebody's son died to balance the scale. And Hammurabi was just getting started. If you were a surgeon and your patient died during an operation, the punishment was simple. They cut off your hand, which you have to admit is a very effective way to end a medical career. And there was a specific law for tavern keepers, usually women who cheated their customers on the price of a drink. The penalty wasn't a fine, it was death by drowning. Ancient Babylon did not mess around when it came to your bar tab. Now let's travel to Athens, around 621 BC, and meet a man whose name still haunts us today. Draco. Athens asked him to write down their first real law code, and Draco delivered something so brutal it created a brand new word. When you call a punishment draconian, you're literally naming this guy. How harsh was he? According to the historian Plutarch, almost every crime carried the same penalty: death, murder, death, but also stealing a cabbage, also death. Being lazy and idle, believe it or not, death. Someone allegedly asked Draco why he made even tiny crimes punishable by execution, and he supposedly said that small crimes deserved death, and for the big crimes he simply couldn't think of anything worse. Now historians think that story got exaggerated over the centuries, and the cabbage detail might be legend. But the reputation was real enough that one ancient speaker famously said Draco's laws were written not in ink but in blood. Next, let's go to Sparta, a society so obsessed with toughness that they turned crime into a school subject. In the Spartan training system, young boys were deliberately underfed, kept hungry on purpose, and to survive, they were actually encouraged to steal food. Stealing was part of the curriculum. But here's the twist that makes it insane. If you got caught stealing, you were beaten severely, not for stealing, for getting caught. The lesson wasn't don't steal. The lesson was don't be bad enough at it to fail. They were literally raising a generation to be better sneaks, thieves, and survivors, and punishing incompetence instead of crime. Now we go somewhere darker. Assyria, around 1000 BC, home to some of the harshest laws ever recorded. The Middle Assyrian laws had an entire obsession with one specific thing: who was allowed to wear a veil. Respectable married women were required to veil in public, but female slaves and certain other women were forbidden from veiling, and if one of them was caught with a veil on, the punishment was horrifying: flogging, having her ears cut off. or having hot pitch, basically boiling tar, poured over her head, all over a piece of cloth. Because in Assyria, that cloth wasn't fashion. It was a status symbol, and faking your status was treated like a serious crime. So far, we've had executed children, death by cabbage, state-sponsored theft, and boiling tar over a headscarf. You'd think we've hit the ceiling of crazy. We haven't, because the two laws I've saved for last are on a completely different level. One is the single most disturbing punishment the Roman Empire ever invented involving a bag and 4 very unlucky animals. And the other is a law so backwards, it did the exact opposite of every rule we've talked about. Instead of punishing you for a crime, it punished you for staying out of trouble. Trust me, you want to stick around for that one. First, Rome. The Romans had a special punishment reserved for one specific crime, parricide, the murder of your own father or close family member. They considered this so monstrous that a normal execution wasn't enough. So they invented something called the penalty of the sack. Here's how it worked. They would take the condemned person and sew them alive into a large leather sack. But they weren't alone in there. According to Roman legal texts, they were sewn in alongside 4 live animals: a dog, a rooster, a snake, and a monkey. Then the whole screaming, thrashing bag was thrown into a river or the sea to drown. The idea was that a person who destroyed their own family didn't deserve to touch the earth, see the sky, or die among decent creatures. Now, historians point out the full 4-animal version comes from later Roman times, and the monkey especially may have been added as the story grew. But the core punishment, sewing a person into a sack and drowning them, is very real and very documented. And yet, as horrifying as that is, it still makes a twisted kind of sense. You committed a terrible crime, you got a terrible punishment. But this final law, it punishes you for being a good, peaceful, mind-your-own-business citizen. Back to Athens, this time under a lawmaker named Solon around 594 BC. Solon passed a law about civil conflict, times when the city split into rival factions ready to fight. And his law said this: if violence broke out and you refused to pick a side, if you just tried to stay neutral and stay out of it, you would lose your citizenship entirely. You'd be stripped of your rights. Think about that. In most of history, staying out of a fight is the smart, safe, responsible choice. In Solon's Athens, keeping your head down was the actual crime. He believed that a citizen who didn't care enough to take a stand was worthless to the city, and he made apathy illegal. So what do we actually learn from all this? It's easy to laugh at these laws and call ancient people primitive. But look closer, and every single one of these rules is a window into what a society was truly afraid of. Egypt feared angering its gods, so it protected cats with deadly force. Babylon feared chaos, so it demanded perfect, brutal balance. Sparta feared weakness. Assyria feared people climbing above their station, and Athens, in its own strange way, feared citizens who simply didn't care. These weren't random acts of cruelty, they were fear carved into stone. Which honestly makes you wonder, 2,000 years from now, when people dig up our laws, which of our totally normal rules are going to look completely insane to them? Let me know in the comments which of these laws shocked you the most. And if you enjoyed this, you already know what to do. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.